Hello everyone! I hope you all had a very good St. George's Day because it turns out the fallout from St. George's Day is once again a mess. Now, we're not going to go through how a load of people think that he was some Turkish guy under Roman-occupied Turkey or whatever they say he was, which all may be true, but he's the patron saint of England, so it doesn't really matter where he's from. And instead we're going a lot more basic and about something that we have no doubt is actually English, and that is the English flag, or the St. George's Cross, because that was a flag designed in England for the English to represent the English. There's no way you can say, actually it's Chinese, like tea or something like that, which is a completely different argument. And the reason we're going back to basics like this is because of a simple, yet apparently triggering tweet from ex-Apprentice star and current successful businessman Thomas Skinner. Simply just saying, as you can see here, Happy St. George's Day, with a little picture saying Happy St. George's Day. Nothing even remotely saying send them all to Rwanda. Nothing remotely saying I am pro-EDL and want all non-white people sent away from the country, England for the whites or anything like that. No, it's just Thomas Skinner putting up a picture saying I am celebrating St. George's Day and I hope you are too. As just 20 minutes later, he put out another tweet. Just find it mental that I've already received a DM saying you should take down the post about St. George as it's not a good look for you. When did it become so bad to be proud of where you are from? I'm proud I'm English. I love our culture, cups of tea, pie and mash, pubs, Stonehenge, the Royal Family, Tower of London, Lake District, Oasis and the Beatles, that should be Blur, football on the weekend, rugby, cricket, Rolls-Royce and Bentley, curry on a Friday night, Big Ben, the City of London, William Shakespeare, David Attenborough, Only Fools and Horses, jumping the queue is illegal, and the weather. The list goes on and on and on. I'm proud of where I'm from and our culture and heritage. Like millions of people from all over the world are proud of where they are from. I am too. And I'm not afraid to say it. So happy St. George's Day. Let's hope West Ham gets 3 points and enjoy your roast dinners. Bosh. Which as well, you can probably tell by the way he has typed that tweet that he comes from down south, which is why it sounded a bit odd me reading it verbatim. But hey, this is just another little foible of the English. And I'm sure it's something that both me and Thomas Skinner share in that we are both proud of that too. But naturally there's more to this story, hence I'm making a video about it. And the next British personality we are going through, who is obviously less on the pro-English side, is Narendra Kaur. And I honestly can't find much out about her beyond her parents were immigrants, and she seems to be on a lot of panel shows. I don't really know how she got famous, but she's on all these panel shows, so there must be a good reason, I would have thunk. But as you can see, her St. George's post was, what makes you proud to be British? Which, in the first place, St. George is an English holiday, so you should be asking what makes you proud to be English. Or doesn't make you proud, so it's kind of a, this isn't a day to celebrate, this is actually a day for you to reflect on why you're bad. Genuine question. Hashtag Happy St. George's Day. And I'm not going to go through them in detail, but whenever anyone replied with something to be genuinely proud about, she was actually like, yeah, I agree. So yes, as I say, a pretty odd tweet to make on a day of celebration. You wouldn't say, happy Passover, what makes you proud to be Jewish, or what makes you not proud to be Jewish. You would just never see anything like that, so I don't see why we should tolerate it when it is done against the English, and we're about to find out what happens when you do. Because it's no secret that Narendra is quite openly against all sorts of British institutions and, of course, English ones. For example, the day after St. George's Day, one of the first tweets in the morning was about younger generations not accepting monarchy and how that is actually a good thing, and that she hopes that the focus of his reign will be doing something about the evils of colonialism and the slave trade, whereas if you know your history about the British slave trade, you will know that it was one of the few things that the monarchy at the time actually got political about, and Prince Albert even did a full speech showing his full support for the British government to stop the evil trade. I don't know what more you would want from the monarchy, but apparently it's a lot more. So because of her constant criticism of Britain and England, and because Thomas Skinner doubled down on his support and celebration of St. George's Day, both were invited on Good Morning Britain on the Tuesday after to go through their arguments as to why we should be proud to fly the flag, or in Narendra's case, why we should be constantly ashamed of ourselves.
Thomas Skinner joins us now, along with the broadcaster Narendra Kaur, who says it's hard to be proud of being English right now, and she worries the coronation is going to make things worse.
Yes, I mean, already you can see the difference in attitudes there, and barely a word's been spoken by either. Thomas Skinner there, if my flag is on something, I will show support for it, because it is the decent thing to do, and it is the duty to my countrymen. However, Narinda is there, just sat smiling as she always does, while she's agreeing with the presenter, explaining that her argument is that the coronation is going to make her more ashamed to be English. So let's see how the argument goes.
I think it's very hard. Unfortunately, the St. George's flag, we should have national pride. I feel that every Englishman and woman should feel proud, but we can't feel proud when that flag has been hijacked by far-right groups.
I mean, already this is trying to pivot the argument to something that most people can agree is bad, which is that the far right is bad and that any of their symbols are bad. The idiotic thing to say, though, is that when a national flag has been hijacked by them, because it's not been hijacked by them at all. The only reason it's been hijacked by them is because idiots like Narinda here, foolishly, have seen a few EDL marches, see that they all fly English flags, because believe it or not, if you're called the English Defence League, of course you're going to fly English flags, and then just ignored the centuries and centuries of the history of that flag and what else it has represented. And you don't even need to go that far, but completely ignored what it represents today, which is the nation of England. The EDL, which, by the way, I'm making no comment on what I actually think about the EDL, I'm just going off what the media narrative on them is. But even if you do think they're far right, they have their own symbol. It goes just beyond waving St. George's flags. So to say that the national flag represents them is a foolish position, and it's a very silly attempt to try and Mott and Bailey this whole argument.
And what it actually represents is this ideology that by some virtue of a piece of cloth that we are superior to other nations.
And then already she makes another massive stride to a different argument. Why is it that specifically our national flag is showing superiority? Why is it only the English national flag that shows that, or the British one, as you're going to bring in later? Why is it only Britain where that rule applies? Why is it never the French or the American one as well, I suppose, but never, say, the Italian flag or the German flag? And of course, if you go to the Indian flag, or let's say the Sudanese flag or the Rwandan flag, for an example, this argument's never put out there either. It only seems to be with Anglo nations where this argument applies. So if it's not going to be applied fairly, I'm just going to ignore it.
And it conveniently forgets our history of slavery links, of colonisation.
No, as mentioned before, we were very proud to end the slave trade. And ironically, that was only possible thanks to colonisation, so...
And a history of genocide and everything that we've built up.
They're two very strange things to put next to each other. Our history of genocide, yes, I do agree that's bad. No one puts up a British flag and says, this is for all the genocides. But then to say, oh, and all the things we've built up. Yeah, you mean most of that infrastructure that the ex-colonies have kept, and that parliamentary system that they developed from us as well, at least the countries that kept it, all seem to be quite successful. So I don't know why you'd put that next to genocide, but here we are.
And most countries that celebrate Independence Day, because I've seen a lot of people on social media saying, well, Ireland celebrate and America celebrate. Yeah. They celebrate because they're celebrating because they've come out of tyranny or invasion. England were the oppressors, they were the suppressors. England have got nothing to celebrate.
I don't know, I don't think you can really make that claim for Ireland because we still have Northern Ireland who still want to be part of the UK. So, yeah, sure, for the Republic you can maybe make that claim, but if literally part of that island want to remain within the UK, it can't have been that bad. I'd also be interested to know what she thinks we were suppressing in the 13 colonies. That revolution really came about because of a 2% tax that the colonists were rather annoyed about because they were getting no representation in Parliament, which is a fair thing to be annoyed about, I'd say. However, when she says that we were suppressing them there, the reason for that tax was to pay off the bill for the 7 Years' War that we had to fight against the French to actually keep the colonists safe. So again, when it's the story of America, it's not really the story of a oppressive regime from the Brits against them. It was more just Americans being fed up with the tax that they had to pay because we'd kept them safe. But that is me being very reductive, to be fair. However, point being, Americans, you weren't suppressed or oppressed by the British. You did just throw a lot of toys out the pram. Anyway, Ed Balls points out that the British Empire were the ones pushing back against the evil moustache man in the mid-century, and this was a reaction.
But it doesn't really work like that because it's not
a fascist dictatorship
I
taking
know.
over Europe.
No, but it doesn't work like that because you're saying, well, we stopped that, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have involvement in slavery links.
She really, really needs to give examples of people who have said, we stopped fascism, therefore you can't talk about slavery. Because whenever anyone brings up slavery, that's not the thing they bring up. The thing they bring up is the fact that we ended it. But it is quite funny because she's saying it doesn't work like that. You can't just say, you did good thing, therefore you forget about bad thing. Whereas she's just doing it in the opposite. She's saying, I am bringing up bad thing about England, therefore forget about the good. When really, when it comes to mythologising your past, which is what Day of celebrations are about, then it is to focus on the good. That's not to say that you can't reflect on the bad of it. But really, when we're in a country that has such a free media that you can have a rabid leftist on to essentially talk about why we should be ashamed of our country, I'd say we've probably overcorrected for those problems.
Because you're being ignorant, actually, Ed.
Oh.
You're saying, actually, that, well, we saved it from fascism. We did do that. However...
Good.
I do love that bit because Ed Ball says, we did good thing, and she goes, oh, well, no, you're being ignorant. We did do good thing. And Ed Ball just says, oh, good. And then the however just becomes pointless. Because again, the whole point of St. George's Day, or a national day, is to celebrate the good of a nation. I mean, this is the thing, we can't even have one day. They have a whole 364 other days to go nuts about all the bad things about Britain, and then the one day where the English can actually have a day where they can say, yeah, we did good actually, can't even have it then.
You also should also acknowledge how much genocide and colonialism and theft has gone on in this country.
Technically, all those things didn't happen in this country. They happen in other countries. I mean, the thing to bear in mind as well is that Narendra here is for sending the Kohinoor to India, despite the fact that the Kohinoor diamond was a gift to Queen Victoria from the Indian governor at the time, as a thank you for winning the war. And when it comes to the ownership of the Kohinoor, Pakistan claim it, India claim it, I'm pretty sure Tibet claim it, or another country, I can't remember the third country. The point being, if we're going to give it to any one of them, there's probably going to be a war over it, so we'll just have it for safekeeping, I guess, given, you know, it was a gift. Anyway, she then goes off talking in circles about how, oh, you only talk about the one good thing we did, which, again, Britain's done probably in the hundreds of thousands of good things if we're really gonna go down deep into this. But for now, we'll just say the one major good thing that Britain ever did was push back the Nazis in World War II. Because that's apparently the only thing that people ever claim is good about England, which it just isn't. You got a pretty comprehensive list from Thomas Skinner before. But obviously she's now claiming that there's only one good thing to be proud of in Britain, and Ed Balls' whole point was that she actually said there is nothing to be proud of about Britain, and now she's admitting that there's one thing, and this is what she has to say about Ed Balls being ignorant.
Because you seem to be very proud of the one good thing.
No, you said
but
there was nothing to be proud of,
you
and I said we defeated
forget.
fascism.
No,
I've not forgotten at all.
But you didn't
We were talking to David Harewood yesterday on the programme about
you've conveniently
slavery.
forgotten slavery and colonialism.
You can tell that Narendra here is a bit of a leftist because all nuance goes out the window. It's a complete zero-sum game in her mind. Just because there's one day where we just don't want to have to focus yet again on evils of the past, even though with slavery I will forever make the point that Britain was the best thing to happen to slaves in the whole of history. But just one day where we don't want to have to live in the constant reminding of that shame, even then you're not allowed to forget it, because according to Narendra here, if you're proud of anything, that means you can't feel shame whatsoever. Which is such a ridiculous position. That's probably why she's constantly invited back onto these things, because she holds ridiculous positions. And I mean, it got me to watch it, so there you go, it works. Anyway, there's more back and forth talking in circles. At one point, apparently the attitude of Ed Balls, who is just there saying this thing that she agrees we should be proud of, is still proud of it. And she keeps saying that she hates the attitude of putting fingers in ears, blowing raspberries, yes, she really did say this, whenever she brings up Britain's shameful past events, such as being involved in the slave trade. When really she's the one here shouting over everyone saying, no, you can't be proud of anything, you've got to be ashamed. And then her true colours come out here.
As a woman of colour, I'd feel in this country that St. George's flag represents to me far-right racism and bigotry.
See, it's very annoying to me that the presenter there is just, as she's saying, that as a brown person, that flag represents bigotry, racism, and the presenter's just saying, yep, No, push back. That's not what it represents at all. And in fact, by her own definition of this country, she pulls the rug from under her anyway, because she's an idiot.
And actually, we should be proud. What we should be proud of in Britain is actually we are diverse, we are multicultural.
Shall I tell you
and the good people of Britain will always want diversity and multiculturalism.
So no, she's saying Britain is actually represented by diversity, inclusion, and whatever other leftist buzzwords she can come up with. So which one does the flag represent? Is it the racism, or is it the other racism? Because, of course, all diversity means here, as she said at the start of the sentence, really, by saying, as a woman of colour, it just means that England has to be representative of people who are like her, who are people of colour. Hence, you can't be proud of any part of your history, because mass immigration only really started in 1997. The country was over 99% white, and much more specifically, white English before, from the mid-20th century backwards. That just also happens to be the part of our history that Narinder wants us all to either be ashamed of or forget if it was a good thing. So when it comes to either the Norman Tebbit test or the Enoch Powell test of would this woman fight for England or even play cricket for England or even support the English national team, it raises a lot of questions as to where her loyalties lie. And if it's not to England, why would she call herself English?
Absolutely right.
And that's what we should celebrate.
Totally right. But aren't the good people of Britain also represented by those flags?
No. Well, actually, sadly, no.
Notice how she has to trip up over herself there. Do these national flags not represent the people of the nation? No, well, no, because I've already said it doesn't. Love to see how she talks her way out of this one.
Sadly, that flag needs to be reclaimed by moderate voices. Moderate voices need to be louder than the far-right voices who say, oh, waving this flag.
No, I think you're wrong there. I do think you're wrong there.
Finally, here comes Thomas Skinner allowed to say something. But I do love how it's either the moderates or the far right, and there's no such thing as the far left, yet again. As if the far right ever claimed the flag. It's the flag of the nation. No one ever cared that the EDL flew it. Only far lefties did, and the main reason it seems to be for that is so that, as Narinder here is doing, she can claim that everyone who's under the flag is far right. How are you going to call Thomas Skinner far right? The man just does business. He's literally the friendliest man in London.
Listen, just because a few people have hijacked the flag here doesn't mean that for everyone else throughout the country should not be proud to be English or British. Like, I love that I'm from England.
What are you proud about, Thomas?
Everything. Fish and chips, cups
Great.
of tea, going to work.
I love it.
Everything about England I love. Stonehenge, we've got beautiful history as well as bad history.
They seem pitiful reasons compared to the bad.
You got to bear in mind at this point that Thomas Skinner is very normie-core. He's a proper Dino. If he's asked what he loves about something, it will be either pretty superficial, or if it's to do with the history, he won't necessarily know the detail, or just say Stonehenge. And really, it's the spirit of the thing. Stonehenge, tens of thousands of years old. And the point of the spirit of that is that everywhere in Britain has been touched in some way or another and changed to fit either the needs of the time or the aesthetics of the time. And those parts of history that have been preserved, yes, you should be proud of your ancestors for preserving that, even if they didn't necessarily mean to do it. And as Thomas just pointed out, yeah, there's bad things in the history as well, but St. George's Day isn't about reflecting on the bad, it's about reflecting on the good. It's one day of the year, just let us have it.
We have a Home Secretary that dreams about sending...
I just think...
If St. George was alive and came to this country, he'd be actually sent to Rwanda right now.
You see what I mean? St. George's ethnicity is always brought up, and people always assume he was Turkish, and in reality he was probably Greek. But either way, it doesn't matter. I really do love the argument of Suella Braverman would send him to Rwanda. No, she would only do that if he didn't come to England via the safe and legal routes, assuming he was even an asylum seeker. We are seeing the biggest inflow of migrants ever, legal migrants ever, for Britain. It is ridiculous to even suggest that he would be deported. We haven't even managed to deport anyone yet, but anyway, that's a completely different issue. And thankfully Thomas Skinner is doing the correct thing, which I'm not doing, which is just to step over this asinine argument.
We have a Home Secretary we don't welcome asylum seekers. We are not being inclusive. And I think Britain is about including people. Yes. It is about diversity. And that's what we should do. But we're not seeing that.
Again, just a ridiculous argument. I want everyone in England to completely follow my values, otherwise I will not be standing by the English flag. And it's just a ridiculous statement. England has naturalised a lot of people. It did that best when we actually allowed people who wanted to come into the country and be naturalised. It didn't happen by just allowing every Albanian ever to come over on a rubber dinghy and then get lost in the system somewhere. When it comes to Narinda's conception of diversity and inclusion and all that, I'm not on board with any of it, because all of it seems to mean, as she keeps going on about, is what benefits her as a person of colour. When in reality, I just want to see people benefiting from their merit and from the value they create, not just for happening not to be white. And as I say, Thomas Skinner's normie core, so when he hears diversity and inclusion, he just thinks it's the MLK, treat people by the content of the character, not by the colour of their skin. That's how he's going to take that, because all the guy wants to do is run businesses and watch football, like any Dino would. So when he says, yeah, exactly, he means, yes, we've actually got to that point, because racism is an incredibly small problem in the UK now.
He would have been sent to Rwanda had he
Yeah,
come
but he's our patron saint. He slayed a dragon. Like, let's celebrate him.
It's basically all St. George's Day needs to be about. When he says, let's celebrate him, he means, let's celebrate England and all that represent it, including St. George. And it is actually a very, very English thing to push for virtues wherever we find dragons. Hence the huge crusade against slavery. Hence the push to stop wife burning in India. And hence really stopping when it's no longer necessary, when it's not dragons anymore, but how countries wish to run themselves. And don't get me wrong, when we left Africa, yeah, it was a bit of a mess, but the idea was that the Africans had sorted themselves out. But my God, just let us celebrate slaying these dragons on the one day we can, for God's sake. Anyway, Ed Balls makes the point that when he was MP for his constituency, there was a BNP councillor, and they still had St. George's Day parades because, yeah, they were waving English flags, but they weren't going to let the flag of the nation only represent the BNP. They wanted it to represent everyone in the constituency, given that's the country where they live in. And so he made the point of, yeah, I'm here trying to take it from them, and you're here berating me. And she just then says again, it's, oh, because you're only going on about defeating fascism. And he said, and you know, I cut out the clip before, but he said, well, there's lots of other things to be proud of, like winning the World Cup in 1966, along with all scientific achievements we have achieved in the country. But she doesn't care. She doesn't care at all because, quite frankly, she just wants to have an excuse to come onto a show and berate the country that she claims to be a part of, but for some reason seems to have loyalties elsewhere. And I'm not even necessarily saying that it's to India, where her parents are from, but ironically, she might actually be so naturalised that she's just part of the academic elite that we've had even since George Orwell's time, where all these socialists are more embarrassed to be caught standing up to God Save the Queen than they are to find their hand in the poor box. She's just along with this anti-Britishness that seems to be baked into a certain class of people within British society, making them a bit more globalist or internationalist than they are nationalist. So I'm not even necessarily saying that it's her Indian loyalties, because to be honest, I don't even know if she has any. I don't even know if she's been to India in her entire life. What I am saying is that where her loyalties lie do not seem to be within or parallel to those of England.
You know what that is?
Nationalism or
That's just
racism.
kind of ignorance to me, because you're waving it around, and I feel it's
Don't start with me.
to people.
Listen, look, I'm proud to be English. I've come in here to say that, yeah. There's a million things. Like, I don't think that just because of a few wrong uns that are far right...
It's not a few wrong uns, it's a lot.
But once again, it is a few wrong uns, though. The BNP died after Nick Griffin went on Question Time. The EDL's not been a thing for probably over a decade at this point. The most far right you can say people are now is if they vote for... I don't even know. I don't even know if I could say the Heritage Party is particularly far right. They just seem to be insane. And then the other alternative, quote-unquote, right-wing parties, you've either got Reform, who are still obsessed with Brexit for some reason, and then you've got Reclaim, which just seems to be Lauren Fox's soapbox, and neither seem to be a good alternative. I mean, seriously, next election, you're probably going to see the lowest turnout ever seen before, with the highest amount of spoiled ballots, because no one seems to be able to see a positive vision for either of the parties, or even the alternative ones. Which actually screams to me, as Matt Goodwin has been saying in his interviews and in his book recently, this is because of the new elite, which is trying to push all this diversity, inclusion and all that stuff, and these values are not congruent with the vast majority of the British people. It is congruent with, he says, about 25% of the British population, but the rest of us do not see our values reflected there in this public debate. And a lot of people watching this probably see Thomas Skinner as who they see themselves congruent with, even though he's not even putting forward a good argument. His argument is essentially just North FC. I see me flag, I stand up, and I celebrate it. Simple as. Which, to be honest, with the calibre of argumentation that is going on here, that's all you really need to say. All she has said is, oh, you waving that flag reminds me of the EDL, and he's just replying, well, then you're an idiot.
The majority of people, yeah, should be able to be proud of where they come from. Like,
They should.
We ain't letting them take
I
it
don't
away
think you
from
should
us.
Good man. Thomas Skinner. That is what I want to hear more on TV. You carry on, son.
Because you say, as a woman of colour, you don't feel that this flag represents you or that there
It's
are
not
things-
inclusive.
Yeah, so
Of course it's not inclusive. It is exclusive to England. It is the English flag. What type of flag is inclusive? The UN flag? Wow, people would really lay down their arms to fight for the UN, wouldn't they? Anyway, she has asked for what her alternative is if it's not an inclusive flag.
I think all the moderate voices, like Ed said he did do, we need to become louder and actually celebrate. St. George actually is a representation of multiculturalism, and he's a representation of tolerance.
According to
I don't even think she could name anything about St. George beyond the fact that the myth is that he slew a dragon. The man was a Roman soldier. He was a Praetorian guard. You couldn't be more anti-multicultural if you tried. The Romans were not very well known for that. The Roman army went on plenty of genocides to stop multiculturalism. You know, the man wasn't a martyr for tolerance. If anything, it was his intolerance of pagans that caused him to die. He was so intolerant, he wouldn't accept them and would only accept Christianity as his religion. In other words, I have no idea what she's talking about. This is once again just a leftist skin-suiting something seen as good in Britain and trying to pass it off as this a representation of my leftist values. Anyway, when it's pointed out to her that the flag is actually very, very representative of pretty much every Englishman in the country and that it's going to be very difficult to actually do this skin suit tactic, this is what she says.
Let's get a new flag, because that one is outdated and it represents far too much negativity in this country. I think we need a new day.
What?
Did anyone celebrate St. George's Day?
You can tell how normical Thomas Skinner is. He is not used to any of this nonsense. He keeps hearing all this stuff of tolerance and diversity and inclusion, all that, and he thinks, but we're there, aren't we? That's part of the good, that we're not racist anymore, and that most people can actually say that you don't need to be white to be English. Like, surely that's a good thing. That's what's going on in his mind. And when she's there saying, nah, we need a different flag, we need a different day, because we actually need something else to represent all that, he's going, but we already do. What? So then the presenters ask her about her opinions on the monarchy and if she would celebrate the coronation.
Actually, no, because I think the monarchy, no, I'm sorry. I think the monarchy represents...
Have they gone as well?
...represents colonisation. They need to give back all their stolen jewels.
Narita, what
I will not be celebrating.
Okay.
I feel...
I mean, poor Tommy, he wants to get a word in edgeways and he's just not being allowed to. The presenters weren't particularly good at involving Thomas Skinner in this. Because I think Tommy's actually completely confused as to what the hell she's talking about. Because I'm not even sure what she's saying, all stolen jewels need to go back. The only one I can think of, because I've seen her talk about it, is the Koh-i-Noor. But again, that was a gift. That is the monarchy's. It is theirs. They should feel no guilt by having it.
sad. I do want King Charles to do the right thing. I feel he can
National
do
Health
the right
Service?
thing. I think, yes, I would celebrate that, of course.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted that bit in for to say, yes, I would celebrate the unbelievably leftist institution of the NHS. And this ironically is part of pride, or national pride, that I think is horrendous. Yes, do have pride in institutions, not to a point where you say, never change it whatsoever. I am fine with the monarchy making changes, because it does need to survive in a modern context. You know, I am okay with the British Armed Forces moving from a red uniform in combat to one that is a bit more camouflaged. I'm okay with them no longer using cannons and instead using Challenger tanks, you know? I'm okay with these changes being made. The thing is that Narinder here wants all of the changes to be completely ideological to benefit her, and I think that is horrendous. Anyway, back to Twitter. There was a few after-action reports from both Narinder and Thomas. So Narinder said, if a flag is sadly aligned with the far-right racists, then I'm sorry, it does not represent the best of Britain. Well, again, it's the English flag, so stop saying Britain. We are better than that. We are multicultural, we are tolerant, and that flag represents something sinister, I'm sorry to say. Moderate voices need to reclaim it, and yet she was on there, who was far right on that panel, by the way, but she was on there with moderate voices trying to say, you're an idiot. It doesn't need to be reclaimed. It's already the nation's. And obviously she got a lot of flack for that because it was a stupid thing to say. And so she made a Twitter video doubling down on her position, believe it or not.
You know, it's kind of sad how the racists and gammons are all triggered by my remarks on Good Morning Britain this morning.
I love it. The gammons and racists are people on Ed Balls' level or to the right. Just to make it clear, Ed Balls was a Labour MP, and, you know, let alone the Tory MPs, which are all to the left on cultural issues to the rest of the populace, the Labour Party are even further left. That means that pretty much, probably 90% of the country, in Narinda's mind, are far-right gammon bigots. That is how ridiculous that statement is. All because she was a complete moron about the flag.
The fact is, the St George's flag is sadly aligned with far-right extreme groups.
The flag is aligned as if the flag has a mind of its own. No, these groups used the national flag for their nationalist group in their iconography, and obviously they wave it at any of their rallies or events. Of course they're going to do that. They're nationalists. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be a nationalist ever or wave the flag ever. That's a ridiculous statement. You represent GB News. Just because you represent GB News doesn't mean that I'm never going to watch GB News again. Though it does mean I'm never going to watch a show with you on, because I honestly don't want to see anything with you in it again. Because not only are you a moron, but you are obviously anti-English, and your loyalties lie against England. So why would I want to watch or support you?
It's a fact. You see that flag, that's what you think, because they've claimed it, and they represent division, hate, xenophobia, racism, and that's not what Britain is about.
The Rwanda policy is a relatively popular policy. The vast majority of Britons want to see immigration down to the tens of thousands. Most English people like St George's Day. Most English people aren't a fan of the EDL or the BNP. Your narrative holds no water. Please go away.
We are better than that. We are about inclusion, tolerance, welcoming. So that flag doesn't represent...
It cut off at the end, but she says that the flag doesn't represent anything that she likes and instead represents everything she doesn't like. Well, if she thinks that, why does she still live here, in a country that is represented by that flag? The reason is because she doesn't really believe any of that guff. The reason is that she's saying all this stuff either for a grift, to try and get herself on more panel shows, or because she wants to get any advantage to herself she can out of pushing this nonsense. Aside from the grift, of course, I'm talking about legislation that she tends to like or thinks is moral. Or just to change the flag because she feels like it. There's little more reason than that. And obviously, once again, this being a very silly video, she puts a tweet after it saying, "Gosh, I've really upset the bigots and racists today, haven't I? Oh well." Anyway, lucky for you, that is the last we are going to mention of Narinda. And instead, I'm going to finish this video off by letting you watch Thomas Skinner. So, it'll be the last thing, so I will say now, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.
Good morning and happy Tuesday, you lovely, lovely people. Now, Dan Dino's cat, the best cat is a little bit later than usual because this morning I was live on Good Morning Britain on ITV, sitting there, waving our flag, having a good time. But guys, whatever you're doing today, I'm off out to work. I've just got a busy, busy day, but I want you all to go and give it 110%. Absolutely smash the day. Don't give up and carry on being resilient. Stand up and speak out for what you believe in. And trust me, let me tell you one thing, yeah? If you always try your hardest, always give it 110%, you will get there, you will have a great day. And listen, the pasta carbonara, the black pepper, it's the absolute governor. And you know me, I don't look when I'm doing anything. Have a great day, guys. I've got a bit of a cold, but we carry on, because that's what we do. We don't stop and we don't give up. A bosh.